The Blackwood family's annual shareholders meeting always took place in the same room, a wood-paneled chamber on the 50th floor of our headquarters, overlooking Manhattan. For 40 years, it had been a theater for my Uncle James's power plays. Today, it would become the stage for his downfall. I sat quietly at the far end of the table, watching him hold court. At 65, James Blackwood still commanded attention. Tailored suit, steel gray hair, and the arrogant confidence of a man who'd never been challenged. "The numbers speak for themselves," he'd announced, gesturing to the presentation screen. "Under my leadership, Blackwood Industries has maintained its position as the leading defense contractor on the East Coast. My cousins, his sons Michael and Peter, nodded approvingly. They'd inherited their father's swagger, if not his business acumen. Next to them, my father David, James's younger brother, stared at his hands. He'd given up fighting James's control years ago. I thought about the real numbers hidden in my laptop, the ones that told a very different story. Now, James continued, "We need to address succession planning. As I approach retirement, it's crucial we maintain strong, decisive leadership." His eyes swept the room, deliberately skipping over me. I'd expected this. It was why I'd spent the last year preparing. "Michael will assume the role of CEO," James declared. "Peter will become COO. Together, they'll lead Blackwood into the next generation." The sycophants on the board murmured their approval. Old men in expensive suits, all owing their positions to James's patronage. "Any questions?" James asked, his tone suggesting there better not be. I raised my hand, the first time I'd ever done so in these meetings. James's eyebrows lifted slightly. "Yes, Sarah." "Something unclear about the presentation." "Actually," I said softly, opening my laptop, "I have some questions about the Jensen defense contract." The room temperature seemed to drop. The Jensen contract was James's pride, a $2.8 billion deal he negotiated personally. "That's been finalized," he dismissed. "Nothing to discuss." "Really?" I connected my laptop to the room's display system, because these documents suggest otherwise. The screen filled with financial records, the real ones, not the sanitized versions James had presented. "What is this?" Michael demanded. "The truth," I replied. "The Jensen contract is bleeding money. Cost overruns, missed deadlines, quality control failures. We're on track to lose $400 million by year's end." James's face darkened. "You're overstepping, girl. This isn't your concern." "Actually," I continued calmly, "as majority shareholder, it's exactly my concern." The room went still. Peter actually dropped his Mont Blanc pen. "What did you say?" James's voice was dangerous now. I reached into my briefcase and withdrew a thick folder. Ownership documents, transfer records, board certifications, all properly filed and legally binding. "Impossible," James snarled. "I controlled this company." "You did," I corrected him, "until I started buying shares, quietly, systematically, through various holding companies you never bothered to investigate. I distributed copies of the documents. For the past year, I've owned 51% of Blackwood Industries. Every major decision you've made required my proxy, which my father provided, acting as my silent partner." All eyes turned to my father, who finally looked up from his hands. "It's true," he said quietly. "Sarah showed me the truth about James's management 6 months ago. The falsified reports, the hidden losses, the contracts awarded to his friends' companies at inflated prices." James lunged to his feet. This is absurd. A weak woman can't run this empire. The board won't stand for it. The board, I noted, serves at the pleasure of the majority shareholder. Would you like to see the termination papers I've prepared for those who've been helping you hide the truth? Several board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. You're bluffing, Michael declared. You don't have the experience. Harvard MBA. I cut him off. 5 years at Goldman Sachs. 3 years running my own investment firm. While you were playing golf and attending charity galas, I was learning how to actually run a company. I stood up, smoothing my blazer. Now let's discuss the real state of Blackwood Industries, starting with the offshore accounts where you've been hiding the company's assets. You can't prove, James began. I pulled up another document. Bank transfers, email trails, board minutes where you deliberately misled shareholders. Would you like me to continue? The room had gone from hostile to terrified. These men had spent decades enabling James's corruption, confident in their protected positions. This meeting is adjourned, James tried to declare. No, I said firmly. This meeting is just beginning. Security. The doors opened, admitting 2 federal agents. James Blackwood, we have some questions about your recent financial transactions. As they led my uncle away, I turned to the shell-shocked board. Gentlemen, you have a choice. Work with me to save this company, or join my uncle in explaining things to the SEC. Decide quickly. The next hour was a blur of revelations. I laid out every hidden deal, every manipulated contract, every instance of corruption that had nearly destroyed our family's legacy. By the end, only one person dared speak, my father. I'm sorry, Sarah, he said softly, for not standing up to him sooner, for not seeing your strength. I thought about all the times I'd sat quietly in this room, watching, learning, planning. Sometimes strength isn't about being the loudest voice, I replied. It's about knowing when to strike. As the sun set over Manhattan, I stood at the windows of what was now my office. My phone buzzed with messages, reporters seeking comments, employees pledging loyalty, lawyers scrambling to save their clients. But one message made me smile, from my mother. Your grandfather would be proud. He always said the quiet ones see what others miss. The real work was just beginning. Saving Blackwood Industries would take more than exposing James's crimes. It would take vision, determination, and the kind of strength they'd never believed I possessed. Let them underestimate me, I thought. It had worked perfectly so far. 3 weeks after the shareholder meeting that exposed James's corruption, I sat in my new office reviewing the full extent of the damage. The picture was worse than even I had anticipated. $1.2 billion in hidden losses, 37 compromised contracts, 9 pending lawsuits from defrauded partners, and a corporate culture so toxic it had nearly destroyed a century of Blackwood legacy. A knock at my door interrupted my analysis. Come in, I called, already recognizing the hesitant pattern. Michael entered, looking markedly different from the cocky heir apparent he'd been 3 weeks ago. His designer suit was replaced by business casual, his arrogant swagger gone. The audit team found something else, he said, placing a thick folder on my desk. In Dad's private files. I think you need to see this. I opened the folder, scanning documents that confirmed my worst suspicions. Financial records dating back 15 years. Proof that James hadn't just been corrupt, he'd been systematically destroying anyone who threatened his control. He ruined them, Michael said quietly. Anyone who questioned him. Suppliers, competitors, even family members, including your father. I pulled up a secure file on my laptop, evidence I'd gathered over the past year. I know. The mysterious contract failures that forced Dad out of operations, the market changes that destroyed his division, all orchestrated by James. Why? Michael sank into a chair. Why did you wait so long to expose this? Because I needed absolute proof, unshakable evidence. And, I added, studying my cousin's face, I needed to see who would choose the right side when the truth came out. Michael flinched. I didn't know about any of it. Didn't know, or didn't want to know, I challenged. How many board meetings did you sit through, approving contracts without questioning the numbers? How many times did you watch James destroy someone's career and say nothing? Before he could answer, my executive assistant Amanda appeared at the door. The federal investigators are here, and Peter's lawyer is calling again. Send in the investigators, I instructed. Tell Peter's lawyer that my terms haven't changed. Michael stood up. What terms? Full cooperation with the investigation. Complete disclosure of everything he knows about James's operations. In exchange for a chance, one chance, to earn a legitimate place in the company. And me? Michael asked quietly. What are my terms? I studied him carefully. The past 3 weeks had changed him. The entitled prince was gone, replaced by something different. That depends, I replied. Are you ready to learn what running a real business actually means? He nodded slowly. I've spent the past 3 weeks reviewing every contract I ever approved. The mistakes I made. The damage I caused through negligence. Start with this. I handed him a file. The Jensen contract. Show me how to fix it. Not with bribes and backdoor deals, but with actual solutions. As Michael left to tackle his first real challenge, 2 federal agents entered my office. They'd been practically living in the building since James's arrest. Ms. Blackwood, Agent Torres greeted me. We've completed the initial review of the offshore accounts. I pulled up my own analysis on the screen. Let me show you what else you should be looking for. For the next 2 hours, I laid out the intricate web of James's corruption, shell companies in the Caymans, hidden partnerships with foreign entities, a decades-long scheme that had nearly destroyed everything my grandfather had built. One question, Agent Torres said as we finished. How did you manage to acquire controlling interest without him noticing? I smiled slightly, remembering the late nights spent tracking share movements, the careful orchestration of seemingly unrelated purchases. James had a blind spot, I explained. He was so convinced of his own power, so certain that a weak woman couldn't threaten him, that he never looked closely at the holding companies I created. His arrogance was his weakness. After they left, I walked to the windows, watching the city lights emerge in the gathering dusk. My phone buzzed with an incoming text from my father. Board meeting tomorrow. You ready? I thought about the restructuring plan I'd spent months preparing. The changes that would transform Blackwood Industries from a corrupt empire into something worthy of its heritage. Ready? I texted back. The next morning, I stood before the newly appointed board, a mix of experienced executives and fresh talent, chosen for merit rather than connections. Blackwood Industries stands at a crossroads. I began. For too long, we've operated in the shadows, prioritizing power over purpose, greed over growth. I laid out my vision for the company's future. Clean energy divisions, ethical defense contracts, a corporate culture built on innovation rather than intimidation. Some of you knew about James's corruption, I continued. Others suspected but stayed silent. That ends today. I introduced new oversight protocols, transparency requirements, and accountability measures that would make fraud impossible. Those who cannot adapt to these changes should resign now, I stated firmly. Those who stay will help build something worthy of the Blackwood name. By day's end, 3 legacy board members had resigned. Good. The old guard was crumbling, making way for the future I'd envisioned. In my office that evening, Michael appeared with his analysis of the Jensen contract. I found a way to salvage it, he said, presenting a detailed plan. Not by cutting corners, but by actually delivering what we promised. I reviewed his work. Thorough, honest, and actually innovative. Good. I nodded. Now implement it. There's something else, he added hesitantly. Peter agreed to your terms. He's ready to cooperate fully. I thought about my cousins, raised in privilege, taught all the wrong lessons about power. Maybe they could learn the right ones. Tell him to be in my office tomorrow morning, I replied. Early. We have a lot of work to do. As night fell over the city, I read through the messages flooding my inbox. Industry leaders seeking partnerships. Employees sharing information about other hidden schemes. Journalists requesting interviews about the company's transformation. But one message stood out. From my grandfather's old secretary. Harold always said the true measure of a leader isn't in their ability to dominate, but in their courage to transform. You're proving him right. I smiled, remembering the lessons my grandfather had taught me before James pushed him out. About integrity, about real strength, about building something that would last. The empire was changing. The weak woman they dismissed was reshaping their world. And this was just the beginning. 6 months after taking control of Blackwood Industries, I sat in the same conference room where James had once declared me too weak to lead. The morning sun painted Manhattan's skyline in shades of gold, a fitting backdrop for what was about to unfold. The quarterly earnings report lay before me, the first honest one in decades. Next to it, a stack of newspapers with headlines I'd worked months to earn. Blackwood Industries. A phoenix rises from corruption. Defense industry giants' remarkable transformation. Sarah Blackwood, the silent power behind corporate reform. A knock at the door preceded Amanda's entrance. They're ready for you. In the main auditorium, shareholders, employees, and media representatives filled every seat. 6 months ago, they'd watched James being led away in handcuffs. Today, they would see the full extent of Blackwood's transformation. I took the podium, remembering all the times I'd been told to stay quiet, to know my place. 6 months ago, I began. Blackwood Industries stood on the brink of collapse, not because of market forces or external competition, but because of internal corruption that had rotted our foundation. The room was silent, hanging on every word. Today, I'm pleased to announce our first quarter results under new leadership. Revenue up 32%, operating costs down 25%. Employee satisfaction at record levels. But numbers tell only part of the story. I switched to the presentation screen, showing images of our new projects. The Jensen contract, once a symbol of our corruption, is now our flagship achievement. On time, under budget, and exceeding all performance metrics, not through shortcuts or bribes, but through innovation and integrity. Michael, sitting in the front row, nodded slightly. He'd worked 18-hour days to make it happen, finally understanding what real leadership meant. Our defense division, once notorious for overcharging and under-delivering, has been completely restructured. Every contract now undergoes triple-layer oversight, Every project faces independent audit. Peter, who turned state's evidence against James, managed a small smile. His cooperation had helped us uncover and fix dozens of compromised contracts. But perhaps most importantly, I continued, we've changed our corporate culture. No more backroom deals. No more silenced whistleblowers. No more weak voices ignored. I introduced our new initiatives, a technology incubator for female engineers, ethical oversight committees with real power, profit-sharing programs that rewarded integrity over manipulation. Some said a woman couldn't lead this company. I noted, letting my gaze sweep the room. That strength meant domination. That power meant control. They were wrong. The presentation shifted to our new organizational structure: diverse, transparent, accountable. Real strength lies in transformation. Real power comes from empowering others. And real leadership is about building something that outlasts you. As I concluded, the applause was deafening. But I wasn't finished. There was one more revelation to share. There's someone else you should hear from, I announced, turning to the screen. My father's face appeared, broadcasting live from our London office, where he'd been quietly rebuilding our international operations. 20 years ago, he began, I watched my brother destroy everything our father built. I stayed silent, thinking I was protecting my daughter by keeping her away from the company. He paused, emotion clear in his voice. I was wrong. Sarah didn't need protection. She needed opportunity. And when she finally got it, she didn't just save our company. She transformed it into something better than it's ever been. After the presentation, I returned to my office to find an unexpected visitor, James's wife, my Aunt Eleanor. I found these in his study, she said, placing a box on my desk. Letters from your grandfather. I think you should have them. The letters revealed a history I'd never known. My grandfather had seen James's corruption growing, had tried to stop it. His last letter, written weeks before his death, spoke directly to me. Sarah, my quiet granddaughter, they underestimate you, just as they underestimated me when I started this company. Let them. True power doesn't need to shout. It builds. It grows. It transforms. Watch. Learn. And when the time comes, show them what real strength looks like. That evening, as the office emptied, I stood at my window watching the city lights blink on. My phone buzzed with messages. Michael sending the latest project updates. Peter sharing new evidence for the federal investigation. Board members confirming tomorrow's strategy session. But one message made me pause. From a young engineer in our new incubator program. Thank you for showing us that quiet doesn't mean weak. That being underestimated can be our greatest advantage. I smiled, thinking of all the quiet ones out there, watching, learning, preparing to transform their own worlds. My grandfather had built an empire. James had corrupted it. I had transformed it. And somewhere out there, another quiet voice was gathering strength, preparing to write the next chapter. Because that's how real change happens. Not with grand declarations or brute force, but with quiet determination, with patience, with the kind of strength that doesn't need to prove itself, it simply acts. The weak woman had rebuilt an empire. The quiet voice had roared, and the real legacy was just beginning.
あなた自身が今自分のことしか考えられない状態なのね。あ、そうですか。はい。うん。で、ご主人はあなたを抱きしめてくれるのが当たり前のものだったんですよ。はい。でもご主人は一人の男性で人間で、はい。 年を取ればだんだん、いわゆる夫婦の営みっていうのは、実は動物としては子供を作るためにあるわけだから、その仕事は